He ran a $2 billion company, and he treated the guide, keeping him alive like a junior employee. He overrode the route. He called the turnaround time quitting energy. And when the guide said it was time to head back, he did the thing that had always worked for him in business. He fired the man. "You're fired," he said. "I'll finish it myself." The guide hiked out to raise the alarm because that is protocol. But you cannot fire your way out of the Grand Canyon, and the canyon does not report to anyone. "You're fired. I'll finish it myself." Those were the last instructions the most powerful man in the canyon ever gave. And he gave them to the one person down there who was actually trying to keep him alive. I have replayed that sentence more times than I can count because it is such a perfect distillation of the whole thing. A man who had spent 30 years solving every problem in his life by removing the person who disagreed with him, standing at the bottom of a canyon that does not attend meetings, cannot be removed, and does not care that you sign the front of anyone's paycheck. He fired his guide on a switchback in 115 degrees, and then exactly as promised, he finished it himself. Welcome back to Doomed Departures. What you are about to hear is a composite story. It is built from real heat, real rescues, and the real and specific way this canyon humbles people who have never been humbled by anything. But the man at the center of it is an invention assembled from every powerful person I have watched try to manage a wilderness the way they manage a workforce. No real person is named here. He is a dramatization. The canyon is not. The canyon is exactly as indifferent to a net worth as it is to a bench press. And I have watched it prove that on people who arrived certain they were the exception. He had booked a private guide, which is a smart thing to do, and which I want to be clear is not the mistake. Guided is the right way to see the hard parts of this canyon. A good canyon guide is not a luxury and not an intern. He is a specialist in exactly one subject, which is how not to die down there. And the entire value of him is contained in the moments when he tells you something you do not want to hear. The Grand Canyon in summer is not a difficulty to be pushed through. It is an environment to be respected, an inverted mountain where you hike down into rising heat while you still feel strong and then have to climb a vertical mile back out in the worst of the afternoon. And the single most important decision on any hike into it is the one nobody powerful ever wants to make: when to turn around. He arrived the way you would expect, which is to say, early, prepared, and completely in charge. Silver hair, a white polo without a wrinkle in it, a navy cap, and a watch on his wrist worth more than the guide's truck. A watch built to survive depths and pressures its owner would never take it to. He ran a company worth $2 billion. I learned that part later, but I did not need to be told, because you could see it in the way he moved through the morning. The specific ease of a man for whom the world has, for a very long time, simply complied. He was not a monster. I want to say that clearly because the easy version of this story is a villain, and he was not that. He was something more ordinary and more dangerous. He was a man who had been right so often and rewarded so richly for it that he had stopped being able to tell the difference between his judgment and the truth. The guide was younger than him, and good, one of the best we had working the corridor that season. He knew the canyon the way you only can after years of walking it in every mood it has. He knew where the heat pooled and where the last real shade was, and exactly how long a body had on a given day at a given temperature before the math turned against it. He had brought people of every kind of fitness and every kind of ego down and back out again, and he had done it by being, at the necessary moments, immovable. That immovability is the product. It is the thing the CEO had actually paid for, though he did not know it, and it is the first thing he tried to fire. I want to spend a moment on that guide. Because this story does not work if you picture the man the CEO pictured. He was not staff. He was not hired help in a polo shirt. Guiding this canyon is a craft you spend years earning the right to practice, and the good ones carry a knowledge you cannot buy or fast-track or delegate, the accumulated memory of every close call the canyon has ever taught them. When he named a turnaround time, that number was not caution. It was the distilled experience of a man who had watched this exact heat do this exact thing to people this exact confident. The CEO looked at him and saw a subordinate. What stood in front of him was the single most qualified person on that trail, on that day, to decide whether he lived. Here is what made this one different from the others I have seen, and what I have not been able to stop thinking about since. Everything that killed this man was a skill, not a flaw. A skill. The exact instincts that had built a $2 billion company, honed over a lifetime and rewarded at every step, were the instincts he carried down into the canyon, and one by one, in order, the canyon turned every one of them into a fatal decision. I have watched a lot of people die of their weaknesses down here. He is the only man I ever watched die entirely of his strengths. The first one was control of the route. In a company, the person in charge sets the direction and the specialists execute it, and that is not arrogance in a boardroom, it is the job. So when the guide laid out the plan, the sensible plan, the early start, and the conservative distance and the hard turnaround time, the CEO did what he had done 10,000 times. He amended it. He wanted to go farther, to a spot he had seen in a photograph, because the plan as offered was, in his words, not what he had paid for. And the guide, who was good, adjusted within the limits of safety, because a good guide bends where he can, so that he keeps the credibility to hold firm where he cannot. That reasonable give, that flexibility, the CEO read as a negotiation he had won. He filed it away as proof that the guide, like everyone else in his life, would ultimately do what he was told. The second instinct was the one that killed him, and it has a name in the world he came from. Momentum. Never break momentum. In business, the moment you are told to stop is the moment to push, because the people who tell you to stop are the timid ones, the ones without the stomach for the last hard mile. He had built his whole life on ignoring the voice that said, turn back, because every single time he had ignored it, he had been proven right, and he had a fortune to show for it. So, when the guide, at the turnaround time, at the exact hour his training and the thermometer both demanded, told him it was time to head back, the CEO did not hear expertise. He heard weakness. He actually said it out loud. He looked at the man whose entire job was keeping him alive, and he called the safest decision of the day quitting energy. The third instinct was sunk cost, though he would never have called it that, because sunk cost is a thing powerful men are very good at diagnosing in other people and never in themselves. He had paid for this. He had flown here for this. He had told people he was doing this. The spot in the photograph was close. He could feel it, and to turn around now so near would be to waste everything already spent. This is a fallacy that 100 business schools warn about, and that almost no one actually beats in the moment. Because in the moment, it does not feel like a fallacy. It feels like resolve. It feels like the very thing that made him. And so he made the call he had made his whole career, the one that had always worked before. He decided that the people telling him to stop simply did not want it badly enough. And then he did the last thing, the thing that is the title of this and the center of it. He fired the guide. Not in anger exactly, in management. The guide had become, in his mind, an underperforming employee, a man being paid to enable the experience and instead standing in the way of it. And there is a move for that. a move the CEO had made 100 times without losing a night of sleep over it. "You remove the obstacle, you're fired," he said. "I'll finish it myself." He said it the way he had said it in glass conference rooms to people who then quietly packed their desks, and some part of him surely expected the same thing here, a chastened nod, a stepping aside. What he did not understand, what his entire life had carefully insulated him from ever understanding, is that you cannot fire your way out of the Grand Canyon. The guide was not the obstacle. The guide was the road. Here is what the guide did, and I want you to hear it clearly, because it is the opposite of what a smaller man would have done. He did not argue. He did not plead for the fee. He did not, whatever he was feeling, give the CEO the fight the CEO was so obviously ready to have. He told the man, plainly, that he could not force a client to be safe, that continuing alone in this heat at this hour was likely to be fatal, and that he was going to hike out and report exactly that. And then he did. He turned and climbed fast, not out of spite and not out of wounded pride, but because protocol is protocol, and the single most useful thing he could still do for a man who had just fired him was to go and get the people who might yet save his life. The CEO watched him go and felt, I have no doubt, the clean satisfaction of a man who has just won an argument. He had removed the dissent. He was at last in sole command of the operation. He had never in his life been in more danger. There is a loneliness at the top that no one warns you about, and it is not the loneliness people imagine. It is the loneliness of never again being told no by someone who means it. When you become powerful enough, the people around you stop giving you their real assessment and start giving you the version they believe you want, because their livelihoods depend on your mood. And over enough years, this trains a man to mistake the sound of agreement for the sound of being right. He had lived inside that echo for decades. The guide was very likely the first person in years to hand him a flat, unhedged, unprofitable truth, and his instinct, honed by all that success, was to treat the one honest man in the canyon as the one problem in it. Let me ask you something before I take you the rest of the way, because this one is not really about a canyon. When was the last time the person telling you no was actually the person trying to save you? A doctor, an advisor, a spouse, an employee brave enough to say the thing nobody else would? Tell me in the comments, because the most expensive habit a successful person can build is the habit of firing everyone who disagrees until one day you are standing somewhere that does not work for you, that has never worked for anyone, and there is no one left within earshot who is still willing to tell you the truth. The guide had been right about all of it, and the canyon began immediately and without drama to prove it. The turnaround time is not a suggestion. It is the last moment at which the heat and the climb still ahead of you fit inside what your body can survive, and the CEO had blown past it, alone, walking the wrong direction, deeper toward a photograph. When he finally did turn around later than he ever should have, the climb out was waiting for him, and the climb out is the killer. The sun was overhead. The inner gorge walls, which hold and radiate the day's heat, like the walls of an oven, were throwing it at him from every side. He had water, but not enough for the situation his pride had built, and the one man who could have told him how to ration it, how to pace it, when to move and when to hold, was 1,000 feet above him by now on the radio doing the job he had been fired from. And his body began to do the thing bodies do, and it did not care who he was. The heat raised the demand on his heart and on his water at the same time. The sweat poured out of him and did not come back. The strength he had trusted his whole life, the vigor that had always simply been there when he reached for it, started, for the first time in his memory, to not be there. Heat does not care about a resume. It works on a $2 billion body exactly the way it works on any other, by asking the heart to cool the skin and power the climb at the same time on a water supply that is running out, and then, when the supply fails, by letting the core temperature climb until the mind itself goes soft and the judgment that might still have saved him quietly leaves the room. No one can think their way out of their own core temperature. There was no one to delegate to, no expert to override, no dissenter to fire, no lever to pull. For the first time in decades, the man was facing a problem that could not be solved by being in charge of it. And he had spent so long solving everything that way that he had no other move left in him. He kept climbing because climbing was doing something, and doing something had always worked. But the canyon does not reward activity, it rewards judgment. And his judgment had walked out an hour earlier with the man he had fired. They reached him because the guide had done exactly what he said he would do. The alarm went out within minutes of the guide reaching signal, and we moved the way we move fast, with water and everything else, down into the heat after a man who did not yet know he had become the subject of a rescue. But the canyon had the head start he had personally handed it, and it does not give that time back. I am not going to narrate his last hour for you because he was a person and not a case study, and because the specific way the heat takes a body is not a thing anyone needs described. It was the heat. It was the hour he had refused to respect. It was the climb he had been warned about by a professional he then dismissed. By the standards of this canyon, it was neither slow nor merciful, and the last true decision of his life, the fatal one, had been made not on the switchback where we found him, but a mile back and an hour earlier, at a turnaround time he called quitting energy. The guide was there when we came out. He had not left. He had done everything right, all of it. And he still stood at the rim with the specific hollow look of a man who watched a preventable thing become unpreventable in real time and could do nothing but report it. He was not at fault, and every one of us told him so, and it did not help, because being right is very cold comfort at a moment like that. He had been fired for the crime of trying to keep a man alive, and then he had climbed out fast to save the very man who fired him, and the canyon had run the clock out anyway. That is the job. On its worst days, you cannot make a person accept the one thing you are there to give them. If this story lands somewhere real for you, if you know the kind of man in the white polo, or if on your hardest days you are a little bit him, then do the small thing that carries it further. Like this video, so it reaches the next person about to fire the only voice in the room worth listening to. Subscribe so you are here for the next one, not for me, and not for a number on a screen. Do it so that one more person somewhere hears the word no from an expert and treats it, for once, as the most valuable thing anyone said to them all day. Here is the whole of it. Everywhere else in his life, the man was right, because everywhere else in his life, the system was built to make him right. His money bought expertise and then bought the power to overrule it. His title meant the last word was always his. His success had trained everyone around him for decades to convert his confidence into compliance. And all of that, every bit of it, was a structure, a human structure, one that answered to him. The canyon is the one place he ever stood that answered to no one. It does not report to a board. It does not respond to a title. It cannot be fired, cannot be flown to, cannot be out-negotiated or outworked or outwilled, and it does not move its turnaround time because a wealthy man finds the turnaround time insulting. The most powerful man in the canyon was, at every single second, still the least powerful thing in it. And the tragedy is that the one person who could have told him that was standing right beside him until he sent him away. "You're fired. I'll finish it myself." He kept his word. He finished it himself alone, exactly as he had demanded in a heat that does not care what anyone demands. When they recovered him, that watch was still on his wrist, still keeping perfect time. A beautiful machine built to survive pressures its owner could not. still ticking off the seconds long after the man who bought it had run out of his own. I think about that watch the way I think about the pill bottle and the camera and all the other things this canyon hands back intact when it decides to keep the person. It is always the expensive object that survives. It is never the thing money cannot buy, which is the humility to believe, just once, that the person telling you no might be the most important person in the room. Next time we leave the dry canyons for the water, where power and money and confidence sink at exactly the same rate as everything else, and the river takes the person who was certain it would not dare. Until then, when someone whose entire job is your safety tells you it is time to turn around, understand what you are actually hearing. You are not hearing weakness. You are not hearing quitting energy. You are hearing the single most valuable sentence a person can say to you. And the canyon does not care in the slightest whether you were humble enough to accept it. It only cares whether you turned around. This has been Doomed Departures. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next one.